Our incredibly talented and versatile board member, Larry Isaacson, is professor of trombone at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley and conductor of several ensembles, including the brass ensemble and pit orchestras for dance productions. Larry is a former professional trombonist who has performed with the Chicago, Boston, Detroit, and San Diego symphonies. For over 20 years, he has been the resident conductor at Old South Church in Boston and has also conducted the July 4th concert at the Aspen Music Festival. He has also performed as a guest conductor with the Oregon Symphony, Longwood Symphony, and Round Top and Eastern musical festivals. A conductor of ballets at Berkeley for the past six years, Larry wanted to learn more about the relationship between the stage and the pit. So during his 2021 to 2022 sabbatical, he attended over 20 ballet rehearsals and performances around the world. So Larry, tell us all about it.
Well, she just took away like all the stuff I was going to talk about. So my father's on. You can see him there, Dan Isaacson. Hi, Dad. Thank you for joining us. I'm saying hello to him in particular because 51 years ago today was my bar mitzvah. So it seems rather appropriate that I'm doing a presentation to my temple once again. I'm hoping this one goes better than the last time. We'll find out. So yes, this year I took a full year sabbatical, my first sabbatical in 37 years of teaching. With the Boston Conservatory merger with Berkeley in June of 2016, almost exactly 6 years ago, it opened up these opportunities. We joined their union, which allowed us to do a lot of new things that we couldn't do before, lots of protections, things like that, but also things like sabbaticals. And I'd conducted ballet for about 6 years at school, so I figured, well, I want to learn more about this. I want to learn more, particularly as a musician, the relationship between the stage and the pit and how that all works, as well as learning scores from top to bottom. A score, I should have actually I could grab behind me, but suffice it to say that a Nutcracker or Swan Lake is about 4 or 5 inches of music. And for me, that takes 4 to 6 weeks to learn. It's a very big project. So the score study process takes hours. It's like reading a book over and over again until you can predict what's going to happen next. You can't really be surprised, not as the person in the pit. So this year I learned 3 ballets over the course of the year. First taking 4 to 6 weeks to learn the score, or scores in the case of one of them, and then attending as many rehearsals and performances as I could of each ballet. I was able to group the rehearsals and performances of each ballet due to very agreeable schedules in the US and England. Everybody does Nutcracker at Christmas time. For some reason, they all wanted to do Swan Lake in February and March, except Boston, who is doing it now. And Jules, which is a Balanchine-inspired ballet, it's actually the first one that has no story attached to it. I was supposed to see that in 2 places. I saw it in Miami, but I was going to see it in Washington with the Mariinsky Ballet, but the Mariinsky Ballet is a Russian ballet. And so that got canceled. So I didn't get to see them. I would have loved to. I have been to Russia. I've seen Mariinsky and Bolshoi live a couple of times each, and my jaw drops every time. It is the pinnacle of, it's like that's where ballet came from. I believe it actually came from France, but the Russians have perfected it to the nth degree. So they weren't on tour, so I wasn't able to see that, but I did get to see it. So I'm going to give you an overview. I'm going to share my screen just so you can see, to get a sense of what the year looked like. You don't need to read every word. You'll just get a sense of what the year looked like. There was a lot going on. I do it by month, so you can see October, November, December, and I'll keep going. As I said, I did score study for a while. Now, I should say, backing up before October, anybody on this call who said to me, "What are you doing for your sabbatical," which started September 1st, I shrugged my shoulders and said, I have no idea. COVID was still going on in September of 2021, and everything hadn't really started up yet. Nobody was returning my phone calls or emails, and I had no idea what I was going to do. But by October, I had figured out this connection of all the Nutcrackers, all the Swan Lakes, and what I was hoping was going to be a few jewels, and started reaching out to different people. I'm a board member, in addition for the Temple, I'm a board member on the International Conductors Guild, and I admit that it was a little sneaky of me to join that board because I had a feeling somebody there would be able to connect me. Turns out their administrator knows a lot of people. And she's the one who connected me to the conductor in Miami and the administrator at the Royal Ballet in London, who in both cases ultimately got me in to see what was going on. Particularly the Royal Ballet for me was a huge win because I spent so much time there. The background that you see behind me is Covent Garden, the Royal Ballet in London. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous hall, beautiful acoustics. The stage is not as big as the Met, but it's quite large, much bigger than the Boston Ballet, so they can really have a lot of depth on their stage. So once I figured out what I was doing, October I started studying. In the planning stages, there was a lot of travel I had to work out. And so I started in London. I went straight over and only spent 3 days there because I wanted to get back to see these Nutcrackers at the Miami City Ballet. They were at the Kennedy Center. So I watched a rehearsal. This was a rehearsal. I actually watched Giselle, which is a different ballet, because they do repertoire there, like the Met. They are just doing different things all the time. So even though they were rehearsing Nutcracker, they did a Giselle. So I got to see that. Then I got to see a Nutcracker performance. I went to see the London Symphony. Why not? And then I went to Washington, spent a couple of days there, and saw 2 Nutcrackers there with the Miami City Ballet, which turns out to be a very legitimate ballet company. Very, very strong. New York City Ballet is probably the strongest in the U.S. Miami, in my estimation, although somebody was telling me they're not in the list of top 5, but I would say they're certainly up there. I had lunch with Gary Sheldon. Turns out he and I have become friends. I met up with him again a month ago when I was in Florida. And so he and I know each other, which is great. So part of this was also to let people know I existed. I wanted to be doing more ballet, all of that. Then the Boston Ballet did their Nutcracker. Pennsylvania Ballet, I ran down to Pennsylvania just for a day. New York City Ballet, actually on the way back from Pennsylvania, I think I spent a night in Philly. And then I was done with that bit of it. And then January, I started working on Swan Lake, started studying that, and got to my first Swan Lake in Miami. Ironically, Gary Sheldon was not conducting. Beatrice Affron, who conducts in Philadelphia, was there, and I know her as well. We've hired her at school. So I've had coffee with her a couple of times this year. And then you see this huge swath of what happened in London. I got to watch rehearsal after rehearsal, piano rehearsals, with the conductor in the pit, pianist in the pit. So basically the conductor's working with the dancers as if there's an orchestra there, but there isn't. The pianist is doing the work for them. And part of the reason they do so many rehearsals is there are different casts, 4 or 5 casts at least, particularly for the featured roles, and the conductor has to get used to each of the pairings. The men and women all dance differently. They have different physical capabilities, how high they jump, how fast they move, how fast they spin. You'll see some of that. I've got a bunch of video to show you, some amateur and some professional, so you can get a little bit of a sense of that. But there was a lot of rehearsal that I got to see, and it was really beautiful. Now, right at the end of this, I got COVID and ended up staying in London for an extra 10 days because I couldn't come home. You can't get on a plane if you test positive. The timing was good because I had March kind of open in my book, so it worked out. But I got home, started working on Jules, and then went down and got to see it. Now, the beauty of Jules is it's 3 really wonderful classical pieces of music, 2 by Fauré, 1 by Stravinsky, and 1 by Tchaikovsky. So I really enjoyed learning that. Again, I'd hoped to see Mariinsky, but that didn't work out. And then finally this week, I'm going to go see Swan Lake. So it's been a really fun time this year. I'm going to stop sharing for right now. To just bounce around like that and see so many different people and see so many different dancers. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different storylines, the different dances. You would think Nutcrackers are all the same. They're not. Swan Lakes are all the same. They're not. It's particularly the U.S. version, often the Balanchine version, versus the Levtov or one of the Russian versions. In general, the Russian / English / probably other companies over in that part of the world are much more serious about their dance than we are here. In the sense that the audiences are more well trained to watch and know what they're looking for. So the audience is very demanding as far as what they want. Whereas here, it's a little less demanding on the audience because we don't learn ballet as kids. We don't learn it generally unless you go to Nutcracker. Yeah, Bob, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. It's a definition of terms here, but really it's a concept.
Sure.
Who directs the dancers?
There'll be 3 dance masters who are up there training the dancers. Now, it used to be that there was a written language up until about the 50s, 1940s, 1950s. But once video came in, they could actually look at video of other people. But then there are dance masters, people who usually were former dancers and had danced these roles, and will teach the dancers the roles that they're learning.
When you're watching the director, are the dance masters there also?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So everybody's working in the room. So there's a lot going on, a lot of people talking. Sometimes the conductor has to wait until the dance masters finish talking and finish helping the dancers with this turn, that step, this isn't together, you need to move this direction, not that direction. It's so detailed. Clearly, what they do is so detailed. When you see a troupe of 20 women dancing together in Swan Lake and they're all doing exactly the same thing, somebody has to have been watching that to make sure that they all know that they're doing the same thing. So the dance masters are the ones who do that. For the orchestra, the good news is the musicians have music in front of them, which the dancers do not, obviously. And so as long as they can read music well and the conductor's doing a good job relating, usually it works out okay. But there's a lot going on in rehearsal. Absolutely. So let me talk a little bit about, oh, sorry, Jennifer.
To follow up on what Bob's saying. So would that be a dance master, I would assume from what you're saying, is different from an artistic director?
Correct. Now, the artistic director might be a dance master for the day, depending on what the ballet is and how qualified they feel to get involved. But often the artistic director is higher up. They're making decisions about what ballets to use, who's going to dance what, who are we going to hire, who are we going to promote to principal dancer. They're sort of dealing with those decisions. And then they'll hire the dance masters who they trust and probably knew in an earlier life. These are all former dancers in almost all cases. And they all know each other because it's not that big a world. Yeah, but I have seen the director, the executive director, or the artistic director help in that sense, but usually not. Richard. You're muted, Richard. That's okay.
You mentioned that there, especially in London, they had a number of different casts for the leading roles.
Yes.
Do they have that many different offerings, or they need that many people playing those parts?
Yeah, I was watching that. Now we do that in Boston too. You don't have the same dancers doing the leads in Swan Lake all week. They'll have 3 or 4 couples doing it. I think of it like pitchers. That for those of you that are baseball fans, you can't pitch day after day after day. Your arm will fall off.
Right.
So my sense is that it's not that they're being lazy. It's that, I'm going to show the last video I show you today. You'll see why she needs a day off after doing that for a night. Although that same dancer, I saw her do Nunez. She's unbelievable. I saw her do Don Quixote one night and Swan Lake the next. Wow. And it was incredible. She didn't finish her turns. We'll talk about that at the end, but there are 32 turns in Swan Lake and at the end of the third act. And she kind of gave up at like the 24th or 25th turn, but it was a rehearsal, so it was okay. But she had just done Don Quixote the night before up in Manchester. So I went up to Manchester for the night, just for the show. It was a 2-hour train ride, saw the ballet, came back home, and she followed me. She doesn't know who I am, but she followed me basically and ended up doing the ballet the next day. And I thought that was incredible. It was like a pitcher pitching 2 games, 2 days in a row. Ying, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Are those rehearsals open to the public?
Not
or
at all.
You have to be a professional getting?
I had to get special permission from the administrator. Other than me, there were 2 assistant conductors and this guy, the administrator, in the hall. So in this hall that you see me in, there were 4 people in the audience. 2 with scores. I was looking over the shoulder of one of the 2 people with scores. Now, the only exception to that is the last dress rehearsal is open to donors. And they'll have several hundred people in the room. But by then, they're pretty much performing. There's no rehearsing going on. Hardly any. There might be a little bit, but very little. A little like a Boston Symphony open rehearsal where they stop a little bit and talk, but not for long. So it's sort of that. They're ready to go prime time, so they open it up. So let me keep going here. For Nutcracker, which was the first thing I saw, and that's what got me sort of really jazzed about this once I got into it. The purposes of the British and American Nutcrackers are markedly different. The Balanchine version in the U.S. is aimed at children and families to bring in young audiences and give parents a chance to share ballet with their kids. To do this, all of the child roles are played by actual children. Children of the School of American Ballet in the case of New York, but in Boston, I assume it's the Boston Ballet School. And it's played by actual children in the lead roles of Marie and the Nutcracker Prince. They're choreographed to be less difficult than the ones performed by adults in the first act, and spend almost the entire second act sitting on thrones watching the action. If you've seen the Boston Ballet version, that's what you've seen. The party, and this is the other difference, the party takes place in an upper middle class home with servants, but one that is not very stuffy. So just upper middle class. That's the American version, which is probably more inviting to Americans. The British version is aimed at ballet audiences, people that were raised with ballet and already know what they're getting themselves into. And these audiences are huge overseas. You may or may not be aware, but in Europe, there are opera companies. There could be 3 opera companies in a small city. Whereas in Boston, we're lucky to have 1 in a good medium-sized city. And similar with ballet, they've got that in many of the cities because people are just craving it. It's supported by the government in many cases, so it's not that expensive. And people really enjoy it and understand it. So whenever I'm talking to a European somewhere between the ages of 20 and 50 or 20 and 60, oh yeah, they know the ballets, they know all about it. And so they're raised on it. So they learn the art as an audience from a very young age and appreciate the virtuosity and athleticism of this version. It's much harder. The stars here, the names are different. Instead of Marie, it's Clara. The Nutcracker Prince is the same, are given to young artists of the company. They're adult dancers, but they are usually maybe a little smaller or younger looking, but they are not children. They are involved in the first act, like the others. Now, if you remember Nutcracker, there's a lot of walking around. There's not a lot of dancing in the first act anyway. So it's very easy for children. For the adult dancers, it's not so hard. But they're totally involved in the variations in the second act, which, as I said, in the case of the American version, they're not. They're just sitting on these thrones. So they integrate. You see them come in and out of the dances for the marzipan and Mother Ginger and chocolate and tea, China, Waltz of the Snowflakes, Waltz of the Flowers. And the rest of the children are from the Royal Ballet School. So there are still children like fighting the battle with the mouse or whatever. But there are adult dancers doing the roles. And so they're actually pretty big roles. These are roles for mature dancers that show off a much higher level of skill, especially for these two dancers. And the party, this is the difference, is maybe something Buckingham Palace could afford. The costumes are grander, with the living room, which is now palatial. So British, of course, are very comfortable with the royal family, so they place it in a place that's very familiar to them. Upper middle class, we're comfortable with, so we see it that way. For Swan Lake, the stories are similar on both sides of the pond. The biggest difference is the ending. In both, the names are the same, Odette, Odile. So Odette is the white swan, Odile is the black swan. Siegfried is her hopefully partner. So in both cases, Odette forgives Siegfried at the end for kind of screwing up. I don't know if you know the story, I don't want to kind of get on all of it, but there are two swans. He falls in love with the white swan. He is lured to fall in love with the black swan, who looks a little like the white swan at a ball. And once he does that, he realizes he's made a horrible mistake. He's sort of committed to her. He's a man of his honor. But Odette forgives him, the white swan. It's beautifully touching and a show of love between them, actually. In the Ratmansky version that I saw in Miami, which is a third version, once Odette realizes she is fated to remain a swan forever, she thrusts herself into the lake. Siegfried follows her, sacrificing his love as well and his life. Sacrificing his life, actually. He didn't sacrifice his love. I found the British version to be more compelling, and I admit to shedding a few tears. I'm still holding them back while I'm talking. Similarly, realizing that she's doomed to remain a swan forever, Odette has but one way to break the sorcerer's spell, which is to fling herself into the lake. In this case, though, Siegfried pulls her out and walks towards the audience with her draped over his arms. It's gorgeous. So anyway, he looks utterly crestfallen, and his love's limp body he pulls out of the lake and walks towards us, and the curtain comes down. So what did I learn from all of this?
So was the second one the American version?
So the second one is actually a takeoff on the Russian version, the Ratmansky one that I saw in Miami. It was a new version, but it was based on the other one. It was based on the Russian one that I saw. Generally, the British ones are based on a Russian, from a Russian version initially. So what did I learn? So how do we work together? I wanted to figure that out. How do we start each section? Who starts it? Who's the boss? Who cues who? What does the conductor need to know about the stage action, and how does this change how the music is played? So I have a bunch of videos I want to play for you. Most of them are ones from school, because those are ones I can play legally. I do have one that is on YouTube that is Royal Ballet that I'll play last, so I'll leave that flavor with you. But I'll sort of break down what's happening, and then that final video will put it all together, I think, at a professional level. So this first one is Diane and Action Pas de Deux. It's a ballet, and I'm telling you it's a ballet because there's a modern dance thing coming up as well, and they're very similar. The way that they're done is very similar as far as the relationship. So when I get the opportunity at school, which I do once in a while, to do modern instead of ballet, I still have the same issues as far as paying attention and learning what's going on. So this one is going to start as many do, how does the conductor know when to start? So this opens, the curtain is down, as you can actually see it's down. And I know to start because there's a red light next to my stand that goes off. So the red light is on until they're ready, and then they shut it off, and then I know it's okay to start. And I'll walk you through this. I'll sort of talk you through what's happening. I won't do the whole thing. It's 9 minutes, but I'll kind of skip around a little bit and just let you see little bits of it just to see what's going on. We have a cute little issue with our pit. It's very small, seats 40. It sounds like I'm walking out, but I'm actually stomping my feet. I've been sitting at my chair for about 15 minutes. And the students start applauding, and we just make believe I've walked in. A ladder. So I'm waiting for the light. It happens pretty quickly. They're very good about not delaying. Can you hear me okay? Can I talk like this? You can. When Diane comes on stage, remember it's Diane and Action, we're already at her tempo. We've talked about this quite a bit. She is not a ballet major. She struggles a little bit. Doing a lot. I mean, I couldn't do what she's doing, but does other things. She has a little bit of issues. We see this backward hop, which we're going to see later. Towards the end, and that's going to be very cool to watch. Okay, I'm going to jump. So one of the things that I always get I find a little tricky is the end of a section where we have these chords and we have to make sure to hit. In this case, we're going to line up, where are we now, 3:59. Let me push that ahead a little bit. We're going to line up with their outstretched arms at the end of this. There's nothing challenging here, but we have to end with them. And there's all sorts of things that happen. Now you're gonna notice she gets off balance, and he has to wait for her right here. He's holding her. There we go. So he had to wait until she was ready. It's very often the case. They bow, bow, bow. He's gonna leave. He goes back to the right corner and will set up in a pose. And once he sets up in that pose, I can start. Sometimes it's the other way around, that they start us. But in this case, remember I said it's like reading a book. I have to know what's going to happen. So I know he's going to go back to the right corner. He's going to make his pose. Once he settles in, I can start. And we've discussed all sorts of tempo in order to make sure that I'm at a tempo that he can do all these leaps. Actually a good ballet dancer. I'm not sure he's a ballet major, but he's a very strong leaper and mover. He's a good partner too, actually. So in just about 20 seconds, right at the end of this, there's a lot happening for him in the last 5 or 10 seconds, and he makes it without us having to accommodate him really at all. He'll do a bunch of spins and a bunch of moves, and his hand gets up where it needs to, and boom, we finish together. That's actually hard, very hard. All right, a lot he does does here. A lot of stuff spinning around, and he got there absolutely on time. So that's a real challenge, but if he hadn't, I would have had to hold the orchestra until we get there. I just want to show you one more place. In this case, if she comes out, very often they go back and forth. He's going to start us. So we do a little introduction, stop, she'll start us. So I have to catch her motion in order to get going. So sometimes it's them, sometimes it's us. I want to show you this because it's going to come up later. He's about to do a very traditional gesture where they dance in a circle around the stage, and you see it all the time. Notice that he's going to the right. That actually tells us he's right-handed. If they go to the left, they're left-handed. So when you have two different casts, sometimes someone will go one way, and sometimes someone will go the other way. And I'm just going to jump quickly to the end of this. There's something called a Swan Dive, where he holds her inverted, and he uses both hands. That's the Swan Dive. I have seen professionals where the man doesn't use any hands. He uses his leg and his hip. It's unbelievable to see. So that's that one. And then, let me see if this will work. I'm going to click on Vivaldi Gloria. Yeah, that worked, right? So you have another one coming up?
Yep.
So this is modern dance. This is Vivaldi Gloria. And it's the Vivaldi's Gloria that we know, which is orchestra and chorus. Now, I remember I said that our pit holds 40. Well, we just put 60 in there. We shoved them in. We put the instrumentalists where they normally are, and we put a chorus of 20 around the perimeter, and you'll be able to see it. I'll play a little bit of this video. Around the back edge. And we pretty much performed it as is. There wasn't very much that I had to change at all. We just had to do a good performance of Vivaldi's Gloria. Again, there's no light or action on stage. I do have to wait for the red light to come off, and then we start. And I'll just tell you that what you're going to be seeing is, I'll just read this, around 370 million years ago, late in what we call the Devonian era, the first fish began to crawl out of the primordial ooze and onto the shores of the new terrestrial world. Compared to today, this period of Earth's history was actually mild and dry. So that's what they're trying to do. I believe I came up on stage. So here's the chorus, So here's the chorus all along the perimeter. There's 20 of them.
Wow.
I'm sure that's a fire hazard with 60 of us in there. So these are creatures coming out of the water and figuring out how they're going to walk and move and all of that. Definitely modern dance. Notice they are barefoot. They are not in ballet shoes of any sort. They do ballet moves. A lot of spins. There is partnering and all of that, although there's no partnering in this, where we are here. Usually bare feet is your first clue. Like it when you sing with them. Nobody wants to be the one singer that comes in the wrong place. Actually, I have a rehearsal tonight with a chorus for something else in do a jump so you can start to see a little of this. There's a lot of them coming out of the primordial ooze. This goes on for a while. They have to stay focused, all of them, because they're all different creatures, have different personalities. So that's that. We did the entire Vivaldi's Gloria. Does anybody have any questions before I move on? I know people were asking questions earlier, so feel free to unmute if you have any. Or I will keep going.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, as your own critic, what would you say about what we just looked at? Is it perfect? Is there something you would have wanted to change?
Are you talking about the work that I did or the work that... I was actually pretty pleased with it. This was Saturday night, so we'd already done it. Well, Thursday, Friday, Saturday matinee. This is the fourth performance. I was happy with it, actually.
It looks beautiful. I was just wondering what you're looking for, how you look at it.
Right. Now, the asterisk that goes on that is that this is a school orchestra. I don't always get the best players. And the women's chorus is kind of where you go if you can't get into the other chorus. So I knew I didn't have the best kids. So I'm not gonna critique it at a level of the Boston Symphony and the Tanglewood Festival chorus. I'm going to critique it in my own mind as to what I could get out of them.
Yeah.
What we could expect. And I thought for what we had, that was really what we were able to do, and I was thrilled. As an aside, and really this is what I'm getting at, is in my career from day to day, week to week, I do everything from working with high school kids, which I did about a month ago, a clinic for a bunch of high school kids, to the college things that I do, to amateurs, which is its own little interesting thing, to Aspen when I'm there, which is almost professional. And then there's the professional stuff that I do. And with each of them, I have to come with a different filter with what I say, how I say it, all of that. So actually, Bob, that's a really good question. And in this case, I thought it was great. Yeah. With that particular filter on.
Yang.
Yeah. Well, before you put them together to the performance, so I assume like a singer, dancer, and also the orchestra has to practice separately.
Correct.
But in general, how many times you have to integrate them together before you can really go to perform? Perform.
So I'll actually back up one from there. I go to about half a dozen rehearsals, just me with the pianist and the dancers. And if the pianist will let me, which usually he will, I will conduct him. So I get used to conducting the orchestra, such as it is, the pianist, with the dancers, so I know what it is that we need. Then I rehearsed with the orchestra separately for about 8 times or 6 times. Then we have the first week, 1 or 2 sort of times we go through things, and then 3 times performance week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, full run-throughs with opening on Thursday. So maybe the answer to your question is 5 times where the orchestra is with the dancers. I do an additional 6 previous to that, and then we do 5 performances. This is actually very common. When I was in London, he was easily doing 8 or 10 rehearsals with piano in the pit with the dancers. And then I think he got 2 rehearsals with the orchestra, but that's a professional orchestra.
And one simple question.
Sure.
When you do the performance, who is the general of the entire performance? Is that you, the musician, or the musician, dancer, singer, directed by you, or there is like each, like dancer has their master, and then so does the chorus? I think choral proper musician are together. You're the
I don't want to get an ego about this, but I think the only person that has any control in a performance is the conductor. The director can't say anything to the dancers during the show, so the conductor has to know what's going on. If a dancer gets in trouble in some way, he or she has to know how to fix it. If somebody misses something or whatever and we have to accommodate, we do it. I think that's why the conductor has to know it as well as they do, because there is nobody else in the room who can sort of fix anything once you get there. In rehearsal, there's lots of Indian chiefs and lots of chefs, but not in a performance.
Well, so that part that you just described, I'm just jumping in here, that sounds beyond fascinating, to having all those Indian chiefs together.
It's wonderful, and it's fun to watch them argue, because that happens too. I've had those arguments and I thought, oh, well, maybe it was me. And then I watched in London the conductor arguing. So the argument usually goes like this: Maestro, could you do that a little faster? And the conductor says, but yesterday you wanted me to do whatever tempo. And the dancer seemed, oh, could you do it faster? And then the joke is that the conductor does it exactly the same way. and the director goes, perfect, that's great. So there's those discussions. But earlier on, I think, if the director says, look, could you go a little faster, the conductor will do that. Or could you go slower? Or could you take a longer break here, or whatever. But there are definitely negotiations that go on between the conductor and the director, or the dance, the teachers, the people who are teaching. So let me keep moving here. So this was the beginning of COVID. We put this together early on in the pandemic. It was April 2020. None of us had ever done this. Of course, you've all seen these now over and over, where you've got all the little boxes, like the Brady Bunch. And what we did was we recorded remotely the music that was going to be done 2 weeks later, and obviously it got canceled. So this is the pot of six, meaning there were 6 dancers from Marketenka La Vivandière. And the way that I did it, I'm just going to jump ahead. There we go. So you can see all the students here. I'm in my apartment. If you look, I've got Tide bottles. I didn't pay attention to what was behind me at all. Again, I had never done this. The orchestra's kind of in orchestra seating: first violin, second violins, viola, cello, bass, winds are kind of in the back, harps over here. And I followed the recording that the dancers were using. They tend to use recordings that are available on YouTube. And so I followed that, but I conducted in silence. And then we first had a cellist follow me. And then we would put her click with me, her sound with me, and then the next person would add to her. And then by the time we had a string quartet and me, people could pretty much add. And that way they'd be kind of sort of in tune. So this is everybody recording at home, never having done this before. And I'm conducting to nothing, right? To silence, although I'm hearing sound, but there's no orchestra. And I'm cueing them and everything, but there's nobody there. I'm looking out on Mass Ave, actually, because that's where the best light was in my apartment. So it's a little slower here. You're going to see 3 versions of this, and you'll know why it's slower when we get to it. It's amazing that this was as good as it was, that the kids got this together as well as they did.
Now, when you're looking around there, that's just performance, right?
Yes. Yep, I'm cueing the first violins, cueing the woodwinds, yeah. Performance art. You notice how fast this gets. It gets much quicker. That's version 1.
Wow.
Here's version 2. The dancers took that And they had already recorded, that's actually me in the rehearsal, they'd actually recorded themselves using the Russian recording, but we superimposed our recording. So this is us playing with them dancing. It's a little early in the cycle for them, so they're not quite together yet. And you'll see a professional version of this and see what the four are supposed to be doing, but you get the idea. Topada 6, so here come the other two. Much slower for the male dancer, which is very often the case because they leap higher, they're bigger, they're heavier, they can't quite move as quickly often. You'll notice it's going to speed back up.
Larry, could I jump in with a question?
Sure.
How is that different, the whole concept and everything, from their dancing to a CD?
In this case, it's very similar. What happens is when we get to the performance, when we're into the rehearsals and the performance, we untether them from the CD, and live music is happening. So God only knows what could happen. So once we're in the pit and they're on stage, it is not recorded at all. But in this case, I would agree with you. They are dancing to a recording. We superimposed ours onto it. But I just found this interesting that we had 3 versions of it. I'm just going to keep going. So you'll see it gets a little quicker. The steps are easier, etc. But you'll see the Bolshoi needed it faster, which is actually why it ends up faster. So they're still sort of figuring it out. Yeah, they're definitely figuring it out. But that's how it works. It takes them a little while. And here's the last one, which I just thought was so fun when we were able to add it. So we added our orchestra to the Bolshoi dancers. So those are the 6 dancers. The 4 women. Even they're having trouble staying together. I think it's a really awkward set of steps. So he comes out, it needs to go slower because of what he's doing. That takes a while to get up in the air, wiggle your feet together, and keep moving. And then the woman comes out, the steps get easier, all speeds back up, conductor has to know that. They are together, beautifully together. Two humans of that different size, strength, moving together, I just find amazing. So that was our little experiment at the beginning of COVID. So the last one I have for you, and actually just before I do that, can you still see me? Do you see me with the curtain behind?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to change that because I did snap a picture. Where am I? Let's see, is it going to let me do this? I might not be able to do this easily. I have another background where you can actually see their set there, which was amazing. I may not be able, I'll do it afterwards because I don't think I can do it without stopping sharing my screen. So this to me is the peak of Swan Lake, this 2-minute video. This is Odile, who's the black swan. You can always tell by what she's wearing. And it's actually the same dancer. So this role, Swan Lake, for Odile is just brutal on the dancer. This is Gabriela Nunez. Marianela Nunes, sorry, who, this is the woman that I saw dance in two nights in a row, and she's still right at the peak of her powers. This was 2018, this is only 2022, and Vadim is also just, I saw him as well in London. He's amazing as well. What happens here is that they, this is the coda from the Pas de Deux in Act 3. There's a lot going on here in these 2 minutes. So I actually want to walk you through it before, and I'll try to talk you through it while it's happening. The tempo starts out very reasonably with simple steps and jumps for both Odile and Prince Siegfried. And by the end, the music speeds up into a fury, allowing them both to execute their incredibly difficult turning sequences and emulating his emotion of thinking he finally got the girl, because he thought he did, only to find out seconds later that she's not who he thinks she is. You'll notice at the end, I'll walk you through this while it's happening. You'll notice at the end of Siegfried's first sequence, he does turns to the left. Remember I was talking about that? So he's probably left-handed. She performs one of the most difficult moves for a ballerina in the repertoire, 32 fouettes, spinning 32 times on the same leg. You might notice the smug look on her face after finishing her turn sequence. She knows that it's not because she's cocky, her character is trying to get his attention. And she's like, I got him now, is the look you'll see on her face. You'll see that hopping gesture. Oh, sorry. He performs a similarly difficult collection of spins. So they're showing off for each other. You'll see the similar hopping gesture that the girl did earlier, the young ballerina from school. And in this case, she has no trouble with it. She's a professional. You'll note the delayed chords at the end. We talked about that, where the conductor has to wait for hands to fly in the air, bodies to turn. And the conductor waits a lot. You'll see that, you won't see him, but you'll hear it, that you'll hear a chord, wait, chord, wait. And I just love, right at the end, the last thing you see is that Odile pulls her hand away. She's in character at the last second, although he doesn't notice, and that's her way of saying, haha, I got you, but I'm not who you think I am. All in 2 minutes. Here we go. Reasonable tempo. He's just really happy. He's met the girl of his dreams. She actually starts early, which amazes me. She should start here. I lose count. I think I counted 38 when I was counting. Crazy. And she does double fouettes. Triple. Oh my God. She's unbelievable. And she doesn't come off center, her axis, ever. Doesn't even lean a little bit. And he does a similar thing. They're just showing off for each other. We're in love. This is great. Oh, you're not who you say you are. Oops. There's the hopping. She has no trouble with it. Conductor waits. He pulls her hand away. Ha-ha! He's oblivious. So that's an amazing 2 minutes of ballet, I think. It puts together almost everything we just talked about, in a sense. So there was a lot of review there, things that we had talked about earlier, and you're like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. So hopefully that's the teacher in me. is that I was able to sort of lead you to that place that it was all familiar for you by the end. So I actually did it pretty well. It's 5 o'clock. We were told to do, I was trying to do this in an hour. I'm absolutely open to more questions. I have nowhere to be, and I see Richard's hand.
Yeah, I just want to share a quick story. Many years ago, when I was a graduate student in London, one of the things I did every month was queue up at Covent Garden to get opera tickets. And I was the only opera, these are student tickets, which in those days were incredibly cheap. It was like £2 to hear an entire opera at Covent Garden. Of course, you had seats in the nosebleed section, but it didn't matter because the acoustics are so good. You could hear everything, and you got these little glasses at your seat where you could actually view them to see what was going on 2 miles down the stage. At any rate, I was in the queue. Everyone else that was there, they were all young people, they were all students, were ballet fanatics. And just to get to your point about how serious it is, these people were serious. And they didn't know each other personally, but they were talking ballet the entire time. The performers, their moves, ballets, I was ignorant of ballet, still am, but it was just a revelation to me to hear these young people, well, I was young too then, but that they were all so versed and so serious about their ballet. So, to your
I experienced that there. It was amazing.
Yeah.
The amount of young people. I'll get out of the way for a second. So that's the view. I took that picture. That's actually us looking at our score in the audience. But that's what the set looked like. And I could do it during rehearsal. I took some pictures during rehearsal. I probably wasn't supposed to. But I just thought that was gorgeous. Yes, Janet.
It is gorgeous.
Yeah. Janet, yeah.
Yeah, Larry, I thought that was fantastic. It was great, your presentation. We see the finished product. You don't really think about how you got to that point.
Right.
And I think now when I go the next time, I'll be thinking about that.
Yeah.
But I have a two-part question. I'm curious as to when you decided you wanted to be a conductor and how you train to become one.
Actually, yeah, who asked that last night? Somebody, Ying, I think. Did you ask that? Somebody asked that last night. Yeah, I had a little party at my house. I started conducting in 1990 or so. There was an opening at MIT for brass ensemble conductor, and it was generally brass players who went to the audition, and none of us were really conducttors. But I'd had enough experience doing it that I was able to get the position, and I did it for 10 years there. I was about half-time, I think, at MIT at that point. And while I was there, I was able to create an orchestra during their IAP during January. I conducted a chamber orchestra once in a while, and then, of course, I had the brass. So I was conducting for about 10 years. I retired in 1999, and in 2000, I went to Aspen and did their summer program. It was 9 weeks then. I almost wanted to kill myself by the 8th week. It was a long summer program, but it paid off big time to be there. And so we had an orchestra that we were working with all the time, and concerts, performances, and at the end of the summer, nothing really happens. I didn't win any awards or anything like that. I didn't think I would. I don't have a master's degree in conducting. But in February, I got an email from them asking if I wanted to conduct their July 4th concert. And it was like, what? Where'd this come from? I wasn't even close to your favorite conductor. Turns out they knew that I was a Boston Pops person, so they knew I could put on a Pops concert. And they had seen me conduct a children's concert where I did 2 Copland pieces and danced with the concert mistress. I did a waltz. I sort of showed the audience, this was a kids' concert, I showed the audience what a waltz looked like. And so they thought I had a little personality, and they thought, well, let's give them a try. And so this summer will be my 21st year doing that concert.
Wow.
So it was best investment. I should tell you that I sold all my trombones to do that. I had stopped playing in 99. I needed the money to go in 2000, and I just sold everything and paid my way. And it was the best investment I ever made to go and do that.
So,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You guys can fight it out, Bob and Jennifer.
Okay. So you mentioned Pops. So what's your experience with the Pops?
I played in the Boston Pops for 13 years.
With the trombone?
On trombone.
Wow.
Yeah, so I from 86 to 99 till I retired. So I was in both the Boston Pops and what they call the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra, which is all freelancers. And in those days, we would do 12 weeks in the summer. They only do like 4 or 6 now, and a 2-week tour and a Christmas tour. And, so there were years I was doing 30 weeks of work between Pops and the symphony work. So it was great. I had a great time. It's a lot of fun.
My turn.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I don't want to ask a question that's going to take too long to answer, but I'm really dying to know with all the different parts and pieces you have to put together, what was it like conducting your first ballet? I mean,
horrifying. It was horrifying because I didn't know. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what it meant when the director kept saying faster, slower, faster, slower. I didn't realize that that's what happens to every single conductor, and that's okay. And the reason now I get is because you have a different couple, and that each couple needs a different tempo because they just have different skill sets. But I'm one of those people who just puts my head down and learns a new thing and does it. So becoming a conductor, I just was like, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. Even trombone, it's just like, I'm going to figure this out. And I went to school and I practiced all day and I figured it out. So I tend to succeed at things that I don't mean to boast. It's just, it's turned out that way, that when I put my mind to something, I make it work. So I knew the first time was going to be a mess. The performances went well, but every year I've learned more. And as I look back at those videos that we just watched, I'm like, oh, I should have seen that. I should have seen that. But I wasn't the conductor that I am now. And 5 years from now, I'll look back and go, oh, I should have seen that. So it's all a growing, you're growing as you do it. And so that's a pretty short answer, I think, to your.
Yeah.
So Larry, with our new chapter of our temple coming up,
Yeah.
how about if you take us to the Boston Conservatory a performance where you're conducting?
Sure.
And then educate us, either before or after about what we're about to see, or what we have seen. Would that it be?
Sure. What do we call it? We don't do that yet, right? We don't do a go somewhere thing, but I'm happy to do that.
Oh,
wow, wonderful.
Terrific.
And I'm sure the school would supply it. I'm sorry?
Sorry, Larry, at our temple, we call that adult education.
Okay. I'm sure they would let us have a room so that we could sit in a room for a half hour. I could sort of talk you through it.
Oh, wow.
You want to do that before the show.
Okay.
And then the show, and maybe we'd even go out for a meal afterwards or whatever, so we could make a day of it. Hal?
What are batons made out of?
Different things. The old ones were made out of wood. I want to say plexiglass, but that's not the right term. It's sort of a fibrous thing that's bendable. Thank you. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. So fiberglass, a lot of them are made out of. You want it really light. They're in the other room. Yeah, I could sort of show you quickly. They have a balance point on them. So actually, you know what? I think it's worth doing. I'll be back in 10 seconds.
This is great.
Yeah, it is great.
And Howard and Janet, you'll have to come to this performance, right? Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Janet.
I know, it sounds like it would be a treat.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just terrific.
So my batons, you sort of can't see it. There we go. Because of the background. Mine are 16 inches long.
Are they all 16 inches long?
Nope, but you see it's as long, basically from my elbow to my wrist, a little longer than my wrist, just a little bit. But the balance point should be right about there.
Ooh.
And what that means is that when I'm holding it this way, the balance point is right where my fingers are. So I don't feel it in my hand. So these are custom made for me. This ball is bigger than some because I have a large hand. So and it's cork, so that if my hand is sweaty, it doesn't go flying out of my hand. And then I went with 16 inches because I feel longer is just, I don't know, too much ego or something. Too short looks like you've got a problem. So, so I have about my baton maker is definitely older. I think he's in his 80s. So I had him make a bunch more this year. So I'm hopefully good for the rest of my life. If not, I'll have to find another baton maker. Everybody's very particular about their batons. A lot of grips are wood, beautiful walnut and oak and all of that. But I prefer these. They just fit in my hand. I like the lightness of it and that balance point. They don't all have that, and I enjoy that. So it's
Wonderful. Wonderful, Larry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.
Right.
You're welcome.
Terrific.
Great to see everybody. I'm glad I hope you enjoyed it, but thank you for coming.
Yay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very good.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.